The number of confirmed deaths has passed 200. The governor has called a state of emergency.
There are hundreds and hundreds of bodies lining the streets.
Panic spread worldwide after a leaked report from the World Health Organization showed that the latest vaccination tests have failed.
With the bureaucrats out of power, we can finally take the necessary steps.
Los Angeles is now the latest city to be placed under martial law. All residents are required to report to their designated quarantine. Riots have continued for a third consecutive day, and winter rations are at an all-time low.
A group calling themselves the Fireflies have claimed responsibility for both attacks.
Their public charter calls for the return of all branches of government.
Demonstrations broke out following the execution of 6 more alleged Fireflies.
You can still rise with us. Remember, when you're lost in the darkness, look for the light. Believe in the Fireflies.
Hey, howdy, hey, survivors of all kinds of outbreaks. Wolfman 4 Sound Dash here. So, some of you might be clicking on this video thinking I'm going to be talking about the show and the game, but let me just make it clear. First of all, I have played the game, as you already know, because I had just recently finished my playthrough of the first game, albeit the remake of the first game, as Naughty Dog wants you to think it is. The truth of the matter is, I don't really remember the show all that well, only because I actually had the first season on as background noise when I first watched it. So if I were to do another video of this, but talk about the show specifically, then I will. But until then, we're just going to focus on how it's depicted in the game, or games, I should say. So cordyceps is a real fungus. It only affects insects in the real world, so it is unlikely to cause a widespread pandemic like the coronavirus did. So in the game, it's basically a case of the virus happens to also infect humans, and you know how everything goes from there. But the virus infects humans. They go through several stages in which the brain's the only thing that remains intact, but the rest of the body is in the control of the fungi. So the brain can't really do anything about it. At least that's how I've done my research on it. So yeah. So throughout the first game of Last of Us, it's heavily implied that it's a sort of game where you get these two characters that don't like each other to begin with, but as time goes on, start to bond, and it's like a year-long journey from A to B, with Joel basically being the guy that wants to bring Ellie to the Fireflies so the Fireflies can make a cure for the infected. Which brings us to my what if scenario. Now, as we know in the game and in the show, Joel decides to do a questionable decision where he basically decides to go against what was originally set out, because as it turns out, Ellie's going to die as a result of this cure being made. So and Joel nor Ellie had any time to sort of process that, because as soon as they were found by the Fireflies, Joel was knocked out, and Ellie who was unconscious at the time, gets prepped for surgery. So it's all happening basically, and as you'd expect, Joel being the protective father figure that he is after losing his previous daughter, to Ellie, he decides to kill all the Fireflies at their hospital, and well, okay, maybe not necessarily kill all the Fireflies, depends how you play the game, obviously, to save Ellie from death. Although this then leads into the events of the second game, in which Ellie eventually does find out what happens, doesn't forgive Joel, and by the time she starts trying to mend their relationship, Joel gets taken away by Abby. Spoilers. So yeah. So in the what if scenario, my what if scenario is, what if the Fireflies were successful in making the cure? Now, obviously, if they were successful in making the cure, it's implied that Ellie would die as a result of a cure being made. So in that case, Joel would have to face the fact that Ellie's not around anymore. But on the upside, it would basically honour her wishes to sort of see it through. So yeah, regardless of whether she was conscious or not, as it happens. But then you have to remember the Fireflies are an organization that they're an organization, army, whatever you want to call them, that have their own sort of goals, agendas, and everything, to the point where some people would question what they would actually do with the cure. It could be that they will use the cure as a means to have power and control over the human race, so that only those worthy can get the cure. Whereas those that have already sort of succumbed to the cordyceps virus would not get the cure because they're beyond the point of being human. Which, as you might have noticed, when you see clickers and bloaters, shamblers, and of course the big ass rat king from the second game, which I will admit I'm not looking forward to fighting, but I know I will have to fight the rat king eventually. When I get around to playing Last of Us Part 2, which will probably be the remaster game. So I think overall, depending on how you see things, I think it was probably right for Joel to do what he did, in the sense that he would save Ellie from the Fireflies killing her to make a cure for personal gain, for probably personal gain. But then there could be another scenario in which they don't use it for personal gain, and they do actually genuinely make a cure for everyone that's for everybody that's still around, so that they can be cured, and all that stuff happens and everything. So yeah, it's one of those what if scenarios that has literally loads of different scenarios. So obviously the scenario we do end up with is the one where Joel kills all the Fireflies to save Ellie, and we never really find out what they actually do with the cure in the end. It just happens. Whereas, as I say, with some what if scenarios, there could be one where Ellie does indeed get killed, a cure is made, and the Fireflies use the cure to gain power control over the human race, or they decide to give the cure freely, and a bunch of other scenarios that I could go into, but obviously don't want to go into because it could be a very long video, and obviously I don't really want this to be a very long video where you hear me rambling on about all sorts of scenarios. But anyway, I think overall, obviously, if they did succeed in making a cure through Ellie, there probably wouldn't be a Last of Us 2, or there would be, but it would be a very different story. It would still be a revenge story per se, but it would otherwise be a very different story, and obviously Abby would not hold grudges against Joel, because Joel wouldn't have killed her father. So they'd probably, I don't know, team up or something. Although I know they did team up briefly, albeit because Abby didn't know that it was Joel that they were coming across and all that stuff. So yeah, so that's basically what I think about how the Fireflies would go about making a cure had Joel not interfere and kill them all off as depicted in the game. And also, as I understand in the show as well, but obviously because it's a TV show, it's obviously going to be played out differently, because a lot of things that people don't quite understand is that as much as people enjoy adaptations of different things, usually every time you see a different version of that story, it's obviously going to be a different version with some differences. So for example, I know when Left Behind was adapted to the Last of Us TV show, they dedicated a whole episode to that, and it was implied that the guy that was writing that episode would have to do something original. And the most original thing he did in that episode was it was all focused solely on what happened on Ellie and Riley's sort of time together before the virus got to them, and it would kind of end with Ellie suddenly finding medical supplies after reminiscing, instead of having to go through the mall to get the medical supplies, only to have to fight infected and people that are trying to kill her and Joel and their horse. So yeah. And that's also, I think, the reason why the upcoming Harry Potter TV series is going to be different, because while J.K. Rowling initially wanted it to be a very faithful series to the books, unlike the films, although the films are filled with faithful anyway, Warner Brothers decided they wanted a more diverse cast, which obviously J.K. Rowling is against, and everybody and has their views about that. Yada yada yada. It is what it is. So yeah. But yeah, that's what I think about the cordyceps virus, and obviously I am going to be playing Last of Us Part 2 soon, hopefully next month, but we shall see. Obviously, it is quite an expensive game. Not as expensive as the Switch 2 stuff, though, mind you. So yeah, but yeah, that's what I think. And obviously, draw your conclusions in the comments below. And just to be clear, I did have to Google all this information, so all the information is correct at time of recording, I can assure you. So if you don't believe me, do honestly do a Google, because the cordyceps fungus is a real thing. It just affects insects and not us humans. So it's unlikely that the events of Last of Us will happen in the real world. So we're fine. Just to be clear. All right. Thanks so much for watching. Like, share, comment, and subscribe if you can, please. And those of you new to the channel, I do vlogs like this where I'm just talking about what if scenarios, as I've done today. Also do hauls, do rants on life, explore different multiverses, look at different characters, do top 10s, kind of sort of, do reviews, and all sorts of other weird, wacky things as well. And those of you that are into gaming, as I mentioned, I do gameplay videos as well, where I do a long playthrough of long ass games like The Last of Us. Usually without commentary, but sometimes with commentary for good measure. And let's play videos where it's basically you hear me talk, whether you see me on screen or not. So that's what I do, as well as occasional shorts as well. See you in the next one. Peace to you all. And if you're ever in a situation where your personal feelings are going to sort of interfere with the overall mission, then maybe back out before it's too late, because by the time you're already committed to the mission and you already got so far, and you get that point where you're hesitant, then maybe it's best you just back out and just let someone else take over, because it's all well and good trying to get emotionally attached to people, but if you get too emotionally attached, things like what Joel did to the Fireflies are going to happen. So yeah, all right, toodles.
Oh gosh, there's a guy here. He's filling me full of needles.